September. Welcome to the September meeting of the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board. I'm very excited to welcome you. My name is Rhonda. I'm the chair, and we can go around the room and introduce ourselves, but I first want to just note that we have a slight change in our agenda from other months. Our speaker is coming a little bit later. He'll come at 7-ish. But we'll be finished shortly after 7 with we just switched it around with the business of the SWAB. And I think this will give us a little more time to chat about what's, about the content of the presentation. So shall we go around? Would you like to start?
Hi, yeah, I'm Nora. I'm a colleague, and I show up every 6 months or so.
Welcome.
See what's going on.
Welcome.
I'm Pablo Garcia. I'm on the Organics and Legislative Committee of Brooklyn SWAB.
Mary Ellen Sullivan, Secretary of the SWAB.
Curtis Phillips, regular attendee. I'm climate activist.
Matt Sedal, Chair of the Manhattan SWAB.
Sherry Rickle, Chair of the Outreach Committee of the Brooklyn SWAB.
Lacey Tauber, Legislative Director for Brooklyn Borough President Reynoso.
Hi, I'm Beth Slepian. I'm Vice Chair of the SWAB and here in the corner running the computer.
Okay.
And folks are writing in the chat, which is great.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you everyone for attending. Thanks for joining. I hope you had a nice August off. So I guess we've done the intros. Why don't we start with an update from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office?
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's really good to see you all. I don't have a lot, it's just coming back from summer, slow time, but I will say that commercial waste zones first zone went into effect last week. I know this is something I talk about a lot because it's something that's very important to the borough president. Ultimately, we're going to have 20 zones in the city, which will have 3 carters each for commercial waste pickup. The first zone is in Queens, so not our territory, but we are keeping an eye on how things go there. Basically, what it means for it to have started is that there is a period of a few months where the carters will be doing outreach to the businesses to make sure that all the businesses in that district contract with one of those 3 carters. And then I think after that, the Department of Sanitation gets involved. But yeah, we're keeping a pretty close eye on it. We've had some concerns about how the department has gone about their choices of the carters that are participating, but ultimately I think we're still excited about the potential of the program to make really significant impact on vehicle miles traveled reduction, emissions reduction in the city. Hopefully worker protections, safer driving, all these things that sanitation will be monitoring more closely in these for these businesses. So it's a big deal. And, we'll probably have some more updates. We don't have a timeline for the full rollout yet, but we know that sanitation plans to basically announce those next steps probably early next year.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Hey, Lacey, it's Kendall. 2. One is that my understanding is that some of the smaller non-franchise awardee haulers in that zone can continue to service their customers till the end of the year if they have existing contracts.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
So the transition is sort of, affected by that a little bit. The second is I'm curious whether or not you've seen an evaluation protocol from DSOI or have what level of confidence you have in their ability to evaluate the success of the zone.
Unfortunately, I haven't. That is something that we have been pushing on publicly. they've done a couple cycles of rulemaking around this, and that was something that we asked for. I mean, in the bill that created this program did not envision a pilot. So that is a concern that we have. And that is, why I keep saying we want to keep an eye on how things are going. I mean, we're definitely getting a lot of incoming from smaller carters who weren't chosen to be part of this. Even though they haven't done the full rollout yet, sanitation has actually released a full list of companies that were selected to participate citywide.
Right.
I know you know this, Kendall. I'm just explaining it for everyone. But one of the things that they have the opportunity to do, the folks that weren't selected, is to subcontract. Each one of the the selected carters can subcontract with up to 3, so that's actually a lot. And so, a lot of those decisions are still in the process of being made. So it's not necessarily that, every one of those small carters is going to go out of business. Some of them are getting acquired by the bigger companies. Some of them will subcontract with the bigger companies. Some of them ultimately may not make it, but that's just something we're gonna keep an eye on.
That's interesting. So there could be as many as 3 trips per. In other words, it potentially adds additional truck miles, truck traffic.
I would not say it adds additional. The subcontracting does potentially add a little bit more to the mix, but I think ultimately all the analysis that has been done about the impacts of this shows it's going to decrease things pretty significantly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going from however many to 3 is significant. So.
Exactly. I mean, right now there's no regulation, so you can have one block that has. I mean, one of the benefits, the real idea behind this is that rather than having every business on a block potentially have different carters that come at different times, if there's more coordination, then it requires fewer trips for pickup, more coordinated pickups, which is great. In terms of just when the trash goes out on the street, lots of things like that.
Excellent.
So we are keeping our eye on that, and more to come.
Okay, thanks for keeping your eye on. Anything else? Any other comments?
Lacey, are you getting any feedback from the communities about the containerization initiatives of the department, particularly for residential buildings?
Yeah, not so much for residential. We did submit testimony to the rules hearing around that, where basically what we said was that we would like to see the shared on-street containers rolled out more quickly. The city has said that they need to do environmental review for that. So, the timeline is potentially longer. They are doing a pilot for that in Upper Manhattan right now. But in the meantime, they are rolling out a requirement for 1 to 9 unit buildings to containerize their trash, as well as commercial businesses. We have some concerns about what that would mean especially for commercial corridors, and taking a lot of input from the Center for Zero Waste Design and Claire, who I'm sure a lot of you know, just to say, that in certain parts of the city, that could mean, storefronts blocked by trash cans, and maybe it being a little bit more intrusive into the public realm than we would like to see. And so ultimately, the solution that we would like is the shared on-street containers, which is, I think, where we're going, especially for more dense parts of the city. But if we roll this out in the meantime, we have some concern that it will maybe take longer to then shift again to a new way of doing things. So we're really trying to let them know that we want to see the shared on-street containers go as quickly as they possibly can. And we've also been hearing some concern from the business improvement districts about how they can comply with containerization regulations, just from like a financial perspective. That's something we're still working through because we haven't seen a codified policy from sanitation yet, so there's not really something to respond to, but they have been having conversations about how they're going to need to comply pretty soon. So we're working with them on that as well.
Thank you. I think that as community boards start to meet again, you may this fall, you may begin to hear more sort of feedback, particularly about the 1 to 9s, but the whole game as well. So
yeah, we've been hearing concerns that folks are worried that the bins will get stolen. I think sanitation's reaction is like, once we sort of have critical mass that, you know, a lot of everyone has them, then there won't be as much incentive to steal. Again, something we kind of have to keep monitoring.
I just wonder if all the containers are identical. How do you determine?
Yeah, with the stolen. Well,
Yeah.
you could do. I remember when school organics rolled out. There's a number, like if your bin gets stolen, because they got stolen a lot from schools when nobody else had them, and there's a number on it that identifies it, and there's a whole process where you have to go file a police report, but then you can get a new one if you file a police report. So then I guess if they.
That's not how it is for brown bins, though. Currently,
No, it's not?
No, I don't think so. They just get
It's very
stolen.
generic.
And, like, they have your like building number written on the side, but it's not like an official.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
this is this bin's number.
Right.
Lacey, I have just a question about sort of like prototypes. Are DSNY and other organizations trying out different approaches in various places to sort of then get feedback and test which ones work?
Not
better
for
than
the
others?
bins. They already have that design and like a contract for the official NYC bins for the 1 to 9s. But I think that they would say that the point of doing the pilot for the shared on-street containers, the one they're doing uptown, is to make sure, you know, that the bin design works. And I've heard from some of the bids that like some of the ones that they got through the Clean Curbs pilot maybe like didn't work as well, and so, you know, they're giving them feedback through that pilot too. So I do think that it's an iterative process to some extent for those.
And that's a really good point, I think, because there may not be a one size fits all. And I don't know if that's their plan. Like, oh, we're waiting to get all the feedback and then decide which one we're going to go with.
I mean,
rather than-
there probably really isn't, but
Yeah.
the data collection is kind of what I'm sort of curious about,
Yeah.
right? Because like we have Montague Street, which seems to be working pretty well.
Right.
There's other examples probably that are just different in terms of infrastructure, so they would need different solutions.
Right.
Yeah, if you look, so there was that report that came out in like April, I think, of last year. You know, there was a lot of like, they got made fun of a little for paying a bunch of money for, you know, a McKinsey to write a study about containerization. But if you actually look at what it recommends, it does recommend different strategies for different densities, you know, different parts of the city. That's why it's been interesting that they've been rolling out the program based on building size rather than like density and street typology, which is actually what the report recommends. So we pointed that out in our testimony as well. Yeah,
That's fascinating.
I don't know.
Yeah. Thanks.
I live right here on Court Street, so I'm
Yeah.
always very aware of not being part of any typology that I can identify.
Right. Okay, Betty?
Yeah, hi. Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi everyone. So my question is about the residential streets, the row houses, the 1 to 9 rules that, you know, for the apartments that are 1 to 9 apartments. And we all have to buy the new bins. I mean, we can have the proper bins now. Eventually we have to buy the new bins. And the new bins apparently will be lifted by the newly retrofitted trucks. And when I spoke to some people at DSNY, they said, because I said that on these streets, the cars are parked very close together. You can't roll this bin from the curb to the truck. And the gentleman said, yeah, we're aware of that. And that the DSNY workers are going to be rolling the bins to a curb cut. which, as we know, at least on my block and on other blocks in my community, can be a half a block or 3/4 of a block away. Not everyone has a curb cut right nearby. So let's say they roll these things. Maybe it has to do with the workers' safety in hauling, things that are heavy. I'm not, criticizing that. The workers need their safety. But then if they leave the bin, they roll it down my street, let's say, they go to the curb cut, which is about 10, 12 houses down. They take it through, it goes up on the mechanized lift of the trash truck. Where do they leave it? They're leaving it right there. They're not rolling it back. I mean, I don't think people have thought this through, in that usually they take the trash right from your house. Sometimes they just throw it over the cars because the cars are parked very close together. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on. So what is your understanding, Lacey? What is everyone's understanding, and how can we help this? Because I think it'll be a nightmare.
That's new information to me. So something that we can look into. Anybody else know anything about that?
I mean, they're not doing that with organics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And those are really heavy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
If you could look into that, Lacey, that would be great, because this gentleman said it hasn't been rolled out yet. It has to do with the workers, and it's going to be part of their work stream, or whatever you would call it. I think that's like really important.
I mean, it kind of points towards centralized, shared
Sure
bins,
does.
right?
Yeah, in the place of one of those cars.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, the curb cut protocol. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Well, should we move on? I don't want to stop anything. But this is a good conversation we're having. But we do have a little more time for that tonight. So should we start with coalition updates? Does somebody want to give our Save Our Compost update?
I can start. There's been a lot going on because I realize we haven't met now for 2 months. So, okay, the brief version, because there have been meetings, at least one meeting nearly every single week, probably 3 to 4 every week for different committees. So there's just a lot going on. But as many of you may recall, there was funding restored to community composting via the city council, which is a different funding stream than we've had in the past. And there are still questions about how exactly that gets to all the groups. We're still working through all of that because we're meeting with the city council this week. And there's been emails back and forth, but I don't think there's been a full actual meeting with city council just yet. But there has been email communication. There's progress with the funded groups. And lots of folks are hiring. So if you're interested, check out the individual sites, and others are working through what's going on. Keep your eye on social media, because we're working on some posts in the meantime about just the differences of different types of composting and things like that. There's some policy work, I think, that's starting to brew. So there's a lot going on with the coalition. But it's good. We're happy to, have the funding back, obviously.
Yeah.
So we just have to start putting plans into action, gathering plans, putting them into action. And then figuring out how everybody works together now, because it's under the city council umbrella.
Sherry, is there concern about how long it's going to take for contracts to be awarded and money to actually flow? You said there's recruitment going on, but
there's some contracts I think are still in place with some of the organizations, from what I understand, and then others have different different contract streams. I don't know the ins and outs of that, to be honest, Kendall, but I know some folks are already in motion with that, and city council is already, their financial people have already reached out to the group. So I think there's work that I don't know details on, but it is ongoing.
Well, I hope that's the case, but I also know that it can take months for that process to wind its way through before the first penny gets the check gets written. So.
And I know that I agree with you, Kendall. And I know one of the things I've seen the groups come together with is, you know, folks that have been in that situation where they've needed funding have shared resources for getting short-term loans and things like that for the groups that would maybe be waiting a little longer to get those contracts done. So they've been sort of working together. I just don't know more details on where exactly everyone stands at the moment. So, but yeah, I mean, that is true. It can take time, especially with this newer stream that a lot of folks aren't familiar with. So, yeah. Yep. So that's the briefest version of compost I can do.
Very that's impressive.
Okay.
Incredibly brief.
So should we move on to reusable NYC? Did anybody go to that? Has there been one all summer?
I think there was one in August, but I wasn't able to attend. But I read the notes, and it kind of seems like they still haven't identified someone to take up that legislation, so they're still working on that.
Oh, right. The it's reusable, whatever it's called. What's it called? It's
it's been so I haven't really thought about this one.
It's choose
to reuse. That's what it is. Yeah.
Did it? Okay. Thank you.
No
and okay, executive committee. Do we have a quorum? We could actually vote to approve the amazing July minutes. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Very good. It was harder because there was no slides presentation in the last meeting and a lot of jarring information. So if anybody, there's also a link in the agenda and also in the email. If anybody wants to re-listen to that, it was quite edifying.
We have a quorum.
Okay, good. We have a quorum. So does anybody have put forth a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Sure, I move we approve them.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Anybody second? Mary Ellen
seconds. And I second.
All those in favor?
This is the hard part.
Yeah, this is the hard
Because
part.
I don't see the full screen.
Oh yeah,
I
if
need
you're
to get
not.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, we're just gonna call this a yes.
I know.
And then probably people put their hands down.
How about we ask for any
Any anybody vote no? I know. Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Sherry's abstaining.
Yeah.
Sorry,
did not
I mean
have
one
time to
abstention.
read.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean
It's
to
okay.
call you out.
I did not have time to read them. I trust they are phenomenal, but I
Okay.
did not have time to read them.
Is that
Since
2
last night.
abstentions?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 abstentions and all the rest in favor. It passes. Okay, wonderful. Should we report about our testimony in the executive committee or in the legislative committee? Because it sort of came up there. Do you want to report on since you testified?
I'm trying to even remember at this point.
Can everyone hear? Mary Ellen? Okay.
So the legislative committee met with Manhattan SWAB, Queens SWAB, and fees that the DSNY is going to levy for yard waste and for organics waste. So they're proposing, I think, a new fee of $14 per cubic yard for yard waste and $85 a ton for organics waste. So we testified asking for information regarding how they came up with these numbers, if there was an organization within the city government that reviewed this and provide comments on it. And then we asked a number of questions regarding the cost components of it all. And then finally, we asked that these tipping fees not apply to any of the New York City compost projects based on the service that they're providing to the city. We were the only people to provide oral comments. I don't know who else submitted regular comments, but we were the only people there at the meeting that actually testified. Yeah.
I got there 8 minutes late and it was over.
Oh my God. It was that short?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for testifying. And so it was all swabs. We all voted. Thanks everyone for who voted to join in the testimony. It passed. I don't remember the exact votes, but it was an overwhelming majority, and it passed in all the other swabs. Michael, you have a question?
Sorry, you broke up just in the beginning when you were talking about what the fees are for. Can you clarify that, please?
Oh, thank you.
Sure. The yard waste is $14 a cubic yard, I believe, and the organics is $85 a ton. And it looks like the organic tipping fee aligns with landfill tipping fees. And it doesn't, I think, as Matt and others pointed out, that does not include transportation. It's just the tipping fee, straight up.
And can I ask, because I feel not caught up on this, have they clarified like who these fees are for?
No.
Yeah, they are
didn't
for
clarify
third
that
party.
basically-
They are for non-DSNY third party collected material. The Fresh Kills facility has always taken commercial landscaping waste or landscaping materials, so they've had to sort of develop a fee structure for that. They've never had one for quote unquote organics, which is non-yard waste. They don't currently accept any from third party haulers or private carters. They don't anticipate going after that market. But they had to, by law, establish a gate price for it. They're trying to reserve the capacity there for what DSNY collects. And no, it's considerably less than the tip fees for landfills.
Actually, we looked it up, and it is directly in line with Northeast rates for landfill.
Well, maybe at the gate, but not counting transportation costs to get it there.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I said. It doesn't include transportation costs.
Excellent. Thank you so much again for
Sure.
testifying
Yep.
and for making sure we do it. Okay. Anything else in the executive committee? I think we're square now. How about legislative committee?
Well, yeah, I think
There was-
Mary Ellen covered it. That was a big chunk of what we did last month. We met a couple of times to go over that. And this month, we decided that we're going to start doing an all SWAB legislative committee. So we're going to move the Brooklyn SWAB, Queen SWAB co-committee to the time of the Manhattan committee. Although this month, because of I don't know why I'm blanking on Climate Week. We're going to move. Yeah, we're going to move. And we know that people will be very busy that week with various activities. We're going to move the meeting to Monday, September 30th, pretty sure. But a notice will go out about that, so you'll be informed. But going forward, our meetings will be the last Thursday of every month, the same as the Manhattan SWAB. And we'll all be meeting together, which is pretty exciting. What is it, like more hands make more quick work, whatever the quote is. But yeah, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all the extra meetings last month for making that testimony happen. Okay. An outreach committee?
That's me again. We did not take August off. We had several smaller group meetings going on, so I'll just briefly touch on those, and if anyone wants to jump in and expand, that's fine. And as always, our social media is ongoing, and he's been doing a fantastic job of amplifying other events and posting things and letting folks know that there's no August meeting and things like that. The there had been some work on, or had been a desire to work with the schools and Miriam Shemwell from DOE. And there was a meeting, I think 2 weeks ago now. I need to refresh on the notes, and I think we'll definitely be discussing it at our meeting tomorrow, because I think it was a smaller group. And some folks from Manhattan SWAB were there too. Shifra was there from Brooklyn. So we'll sort of regroup on that and see where the next steps are. I think they're doing a variety of things in the school, and we're kind of wondering what we may want to get more involved with. So we'll talk about that tomorrow night. Another number of folks are working on updating our presentation for community boards that we've done on and off in the past over the years. That is in progress. I think we're going to have a meeting. Mark can correct me, but I think our goal is next week because of Climate Week. The following week will be busy, but the timeline for trying to present to community boards and just touch base with them again is early in the new year, because we know folks are going to be busy with the earlier mentioned rollout of containerized household residential waste. So that's going to be another whole topic, which is not our topic necessarily to discuss with the community boards. And then there's also a community board letter that a couple folks, Mary Ellen and Betty, and I think Michael, have been really working on, and we're very close to getting that together, recommending some language for the statement of needs that each community board has to do and vote on by the end of October, if I have that timeline correctly. So I think our next steps for that are to finalize the letter and then submit it for review and approval by the exec committee. So it's nothing, and you guys can definitely talk more about what the couple of key topics are. But it's nothing that we haven't all talked about and agreed on before. It's just trying to help add some language for community boards to put in their statement of needs. So
because the sanitation committee is often like nobody's on it.
Well, or they're focused on other things depending on their task. We know there's a variety of different setups for all the community boards. So we'll be working on getting all that going.
So one thing on that real quick.
Yeah.
So to prep for that, all the boards meet with all the agencies over this month. It's called Borough Consultations. The meeting for the Brooklyn boards with sanitation is on the 18th. So for those of you who are CB members or know someone who is, if there are questions, that you want to get into that, I would contact your chair or your district manager now so that they can add to the list. I think they've already sent questions. The way those work is they send questions in advance to the agency. The agency provides answers in writing. They go over them in the meeting, but then it's kind of an open Q&A.
Can anybody attend if you're part of the community board?
It's usually just the chairs.
Okay. All right.
I think. I'm not sure.
The chairs of the whole community board.
Yeah.
Not committee chairs.
Right.
Okay.
The chairs of each board.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Lacey, you said the 18th. You mean September or October?
I mean September.
Debbie, do you want to add something? Thank you.
Yes. I think can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little faint.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's a report that comes out like officially after that meeting, so we can check in on different community boards and what issues they're asking about.
I don't know. I don't think
all the
so.
community boards publish their statements.
Yeah, they all. It's all about informing that process, and you're right. All the statements of needs are public in the end, but I don't know if anything from that particular meeting is.
But I meant like very specific DSNY related. Like if we could get. There's no notes.
I mean, someone from the borough. They work it out among themselves, the chairs, who takes notes. So if you're on a board, maybe ask your chair
Or if you surreptitiously want to see a board's information, like that's not possible. Okay.
Mm.
You have to ask them. All right.
Okay.
That's good information. I didn't know
Yeah.
they did that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lacey.
Is it the similar
If
thing?
I
as
can
the
add something
organics?
to that. Hi, a few years ago, I was on my community board. I was invited to that. I haven't been invited before or after. And but it was kind of interesting because questions were asked, but the departments, and I went to sanitation, I went to education, and maybe one other agency, and they have like very scripted kind of PR responses. It wasn't a really interactive and informational meeting, shall I say.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that makes sense. I mean, I feel like anytime you have a big city agency speaking at, say, a SWAB meeting, you get kind of the same, yeah, interaction level. Except for the borough president's office, of course.
All
Of course.
the agencies are different, I
Yeah.
will say, but you know, it's useful to just be able to raise up issues. You know, those people in the meeting may or may not be able to answer questions, but they're going to be reporting back to somebody. You know,
That's so good.
it's useful either way.
That's so good. Yeah. Like constituent affairs, when you're calling about something, they make little tally marks about how many people are calling. But that's good. Okay.
So yeah, so our next meeting is tomorrow night, September 10th at 6:30 till 8 o'clock via Zoom. If you're interested, let me know. If you can put my email in the chat and just send me a quick email. Wait, and Uli, I know asked a question, but now I can't see it. Uh-oh.
Oh, I was wondering how you decide which community boards to present to.
I don't think we're intentionally going to not present any. I think we haven't necessarily decided that, but that, you know, it's going to be set up for anyone that will have us present, but also, you know, folks, we have several members of community boards on the SWAB, so that would be like our logical first place to start and then expand from there. And we've got several community board folks that attend our meetings and things like that. So like we're definitely going to be reaching out to all of the contacts we have to get on the schedule for that.
Oh, okay. I was just going to offer another contact. My partner's on the CB4 community board. Do you want me to put you in touch?
Oh, good.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so Beth is putting Sherry's email in the chat. If you can connect them, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice.
Yeah. That's our quick, another quick update.
Very nice. Very thorough. Thank you. Thorough but quick. Okay, so we move on to organics industry. Who wants to present for that? Is it Allison or
Yeah,
Vondra?
couple things. Just had our monthly meeting where, you know, we talk a lot about Manhattan because we're 4 weeks away from launching curbside there. So, I mean, I'm always curious to know if anybody in Brooklyn, you know, how you're doing with your own curbside programs, you know, if you need help, kind of, you know, challenges you might be having. I mean, you can all, you know, send me an email or put something in the chat rather than discuss here. But I think the other thing that was like really relevant for Brooklyn SWAB is the, you know, there's this article that was in the Times about PFAS and sewage sludge and how it's contaminating. Also, you know, I don't know how many million acres and acres and acres of land, contaminating animals, killing animals, you know, like bankrupting farmers. It just seems like it begs a response, since, you know, we're potentially contributing to this problem by use of the Newtown Free co-digester. So I just kind of wanted to throw it out there because it's also, as I, you know, was Googling around, I came across the fact that there's also public comment. I mean, there's this ongoing problem in Newtown Creek, you know, the Superfund site. I guess they've been, you know, I don't know how many years that's been going on. But there's a public comment period now. It's open through like the end of September or the 27th, where, you can comment on that, but it almost seems like it's also an opportunity to also add comments that, we're trying to clean up a Superfund site, but look, at the same time, we're contributing more toxins. So it's like an infinite loop, or we're just like cleaning up one thing while while we have another problem. So I don't know if that's something, that anyone in Brooklyn is closely talking to the Newtown Creek Alliance. Lacey, I don't know if your office is kind of working on the whole, this EPA public comment, just on the cleanup. I think it's called the East Branch. They're working on, it's like the first phase. I can put some links in the chat, but I just wanted
I have the info about it, and unfortunately, I have a conflict for the public meeting. So I've been meaning to reach out to Willis and find out what they're planning to do. We're not planning to submit any comments for the meeting. I would like to kind of hear what folks are saying. I don't really think that what's going on at the treatment plant is related to this, really. I'm not sure it's the right venue for that conversation, but I will say the presentation we're about to get hits on this a lot. So,
and also I want to say that connected to that article and this presentation is the presentation we had last month, right? So she talked a lot about PFAS, and it was an interesting timing for that article in terms of the SWAB's learning journey about this. And there's a little bit of talk within the legislative committee, a little bit in the executive committee about the possibility of writing a letter to DEC asking them to reevaluate their well, you want to talk about that? This is slightly different from that, but
I think in the last meeting, and because I write these extensive notes, I am remembering things. Laura Orlando brought up the fact that so much comes out of wastewater treatment plants. And she also referenced a study from Princeton saying that the greenhouse gas emissions are 2 to 3 times higher, 3 specifically if it's co-digestion, than originally was estimated by the EPA. So someone within it, I forget his name, he said, well, wasn't the whole point of the DEC's business case on this saying that it was less greenhouse gas emitting than composting, or equal? And so he said, why shouldn't this be revisited if the business case is no longer valid? Mm-hmm. So that was the impetus behind this, and the reevaluation thoughts began.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very nice. Oh, public.
Well, you seem to have overlapping jurisdictions because we're solid waste disposal, and is there a water waste advisory committee or?
Oh, I think it's about the biosolids or sludge that it produces, which has PFAS, which is solid waste. And it's all about whatever they are treating in the wastewater treatment plant and adding then organics to it. Like 80% of our organics that are collected now are going there and making even more of the PFAS problem.
Yes, but we're going into the water treatment facility. So that seems like we may not have any jurisdiction there.
Well, I mean, it's solid waste going into the water treatment facility, right?
It's our.
You certainly have.
It's our food.
You have jurisdiction over the organics before they get there.
Right.
And
but
it's debatable as to whether we have jurisdiction of what comes out. Mm-hmm. But I suspect, not 100% sure, but that the waste export costs, and I think it falls under DSNY, includes biosolids. So we can certainly make a case before it gets there, and we can probably make a very good case after it comes out.
Because one solution would be to eliminate the water going into the waste treatment, because it's the overflow that is a concern that goes untreated. The city, I think, just made a deal with Denmark to follow their model of cloudburst management, but I didn't want to go into it because that seems to be getting into the water treatment side.
That's a part we're not really authorized to go into wastewater.
Yeah.
Just like commercial waste, we're really not to do it. Commercial waste or construction and demolition.
set for. Okay.
Well, I can talk about whatever I want.
I know, I know,
Sorry.
I know. And I feel like that there's a solid waste implication. I think as long as there's a solid waste implication, there's interest.
Because the DEC seems to have a lot to say about the solid waste.
Hmm.
And the DEP seems to be different, have different planning.
Ah.
So those are two
They have different
jurisdictions.
aspirations. The DEP's aspirational plans are different than.
Yes.
Right. Nice. Okay. So I feel like we could talk forever about this, but let's try to stay on track and maybe we'll circle back around to, I have a feeling this will come up again at some point tonight. The events committee, is Liz here to talk about? Okay. Well, excellent. I'm sure she'll be sending a meeting notice around about the next meeting. How about NYCHA committee? I know they just met in September. The next one.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan.
The NYCHA committee is meeting again on Thursday, October 10th. And they're discussing outreach to residents of NYCHA. They're proposing a waste audit, and there's a lot of discussion of eco hubs, which are kind of like community gardens. And so I'll put the finalized website in the chat. That's all I have.
Thank you. Again, I don't know, you're competing with Sherry for being short and sweet. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we have our exciting guest speaker, Ezra, who's been at our last meetings in person as he's been interning, and we're very grateful for his amazing work this summer and very conscientious. He's back at school now, but he has time for the little old SWAB. Thank you for coming, Ezra.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I can begin by introducing myself again. I think I briefly did at the first meeting when I was in person, but I am now a senior at Tufts, and I'm studying environmental studies and philosophy and co-majors, and then doing a minor in economics, specifically interested in the intersection between the environment and ethics. And yeah, I spent the summer interning with the SWABs in the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, looking at Intro 696, which is, as I'll get into more deeply in my presentation, introduction in the City Council to process organic pickups through compost. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna share my screen. I haven't shared a Zoom screen in a while. There we go. Okay. There. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Great.
Great.
So yeah, just to jump in, I think it'd be helpful to talk about a little bit of background about Intro 696 and the organics program in New York. I know we're the SWAB, so we know a fair amount about it, but as a result of the Zero Waste Act in 2023, DSNY was forced to begin picking up organic waste, so food, fruit scraps, and yard waste from residential buildings in New York City. And this is a big development because around 30% of our waste stream is compostable. Falls under this organic category. And waste in general is a large portion of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. So at around 4%, it's the third largest category. And we know that New York City, as all other major cities around the world, is really fighting to meet these greenhouse gas reduction commitments that they've put on record. So it's going to be, a large part of that work. So pickups have begun in certain boroughs, in Brooklyn and Queens, and Staten Island, and they'll be fully rolled out in Manhattan and Bronx, by the end of this month. And at the beginning, this number of 65,000 tons of pickups in Queens after the program began was sort of cited as an example of a lot of compliance, a lot of capture, and this is a high number, but it's worth noting that it includes a lot of yard waste, which exists in Queens, but less yard waste exists in these other boroughs. And we've seen that capture rates have dropped in the months following. And so we, as a city and DSNY specifically, needs to perform significant outreach in order to meet their goals for the diversion from landfills and capture rates of organics. In terms of eventually meeting these greenhouse gas emission reductions and processing goals. So that brings us to the ways in which these new pickups are being processed. And DSNY has stated on the record that they plan on sending, or would like to send, around 80% of the food scrap pickups to anaerobic co-digesters, and specifically Newtown Creek. They've said that they are interested in sending the yard waste at a higher proportion to traditional compost, and we'll talk more about that later. But as I've said, the majority of organic pickups are currently and will increasingly be food waste. So I want to make a distinction here between digestion and co-digestion. I joined the meeting. I'm sorry, I had to come from a class, but I heard we were talking about the PFAS content in both digestate and co-digestate, and the biosolid that produces from it. I mean that is produced by it. And in general, anaerobic digestion is a great way to process wastewater and sewage. And so in this presentation and in our research, we are in no way trying to discourage the city from processing those products through that. But co-digestion becomes a little bit more iffy. And so in terms of the DSNY sending our food scraps to there are a lot of issues that I want to highlight. So one is PFAS content, and we had Laura Orlando come and talk to the SWAB 2 months ago about that. And essentially she outlined, and we're seeing newer studies on this and articles on it, like the New York Times one that just came out a couple weeks ago, that these anaerobic digesters and co-digesters are producing a biosolid that is riddled with PFAS. And this is a big issue because the application of these biosolids, whether as fertilizer or compost, is a core part of the model of these anaerobic co-digesters. And the DEC, in commissioning a study, found that it was necessary in order for the process to be carbon negative. And if we don't do something with these biosolids, then the process will remain carbon positive. So it sort of puts the city in a position of either remaining in a carbon positive cycle and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, or applying these toxic, in many cases, biosolids as fertilizer, and them ultimately making their way downstream into our food systems. And there is an argument that that only digesting food scrap separately from wastewater and sewage would reduce PFAS content, and that is true. But again, the PFAS will still be present. There is no currently agreed upon safe level of PFAS contamination, and we don't really have the infrastructure to process sewage and food scraps separately in New York. So another factor here is our reliance on the inequitable infrastructure, and specifically I want to highlight truck traffic here. So we had the Waste Equity Act passed a handful of years ago in the City Council by then City Council member Antonio Reynoso, who became Brooklyn Borough President. And a large goal of this legislation was to reduce truck traffic in North Brooklyn, considering that it has by far the largest proportion of waste infrastructure and waste processing infrastructure in the city. And so judging, on DSNY's numbers, operating at full capacity, accepting as much food scraps as they eventually plan to, DSNY would be introducing around 40 trucks a day at least into North Brooklyn in order to haul that material in. And that doesn't even take into account the pre-processing and the eventual trucking out of biosolids. So it's likely it would be a lot more than 40 trucks. And we know this creates a lot of environmental justice issues, a lot of health issues, and it would create a significant burden on the North Brooklyn residents that have only recently seen this reduction in truck traffic and have been benefiting from that. And then just to touch a little bit more on the pre-processing front, currently, in order for food scraps to be introduced into this co-digestion system, they need to be pre-processed, which is often done by waste management at the Varick Street transfer station. And this process is pretty energy intensive, as is the co-digestion process. And it creates volatile organic compounds and other smells, and people who work there are cited on record saying that they have trouble eating after they come to work. They really don't enjoy working in these environments. And so this is sort of a pushback that we can give to people who might say that compost is odorous. Well, a lot of the infrastructure that is required for this other route that the city is planning on taking is also odorous and oftentimes more harmful for the people who are working with it and engaging with it. And then another thing that I heard as I was coming in is methane leakage. And so Princeton recently did a study around a year and a half ago that they tested methane leakage from a variety of sites around the US and found that digesters and co-digesters are leaking methane at around twice the rate that they had initially indicated. And so this is a problem for, again, the greenhouse gas impact of it, but also more acute impact for people living around there, and just a reduction in efficiency that these plants have been proposed as an opportunity to re-inject renewable natural gas into the grid. But if we're losing that, then that's a significant loss in efficiency. And lastly is just the cost of the system. So New York City's paying a large tipping fee to waste management in order to pre-process this and eventually digest it. And the energy costs of the system are quite high as well. And so the sort of alternative to this is what Intro 696 is attempting to do, which would establish a network of different sized sites, operators, drop-offs. So essentially the goal here is to take the pickups from the organic program and process them through aerobic digestion, through compost, and have a resilient and diverse network that can be built out as these organics are increasingly picked up, rather than investing in large companies to build and operate these somewhat problematic co-digestion sites. And so just a little bit more about the numbers here. So it would establish 180,000 tons of compost capacity in each borough. And these, could be met. This is a cumulative number, so this number for each borough can be met with any number of sites. And there's also no requirement about site operation, site ownership, things like that. The goal, generally of the intro is to improve resiliency and the carbon neutrality, work towards carbon neutrality in New York City, and this specifically tackles the organic stream of our waste. And it was authored by Councilwoman Sandy Nurse, and currently has 20 sponsors in the City Council. So to talk about some of the benefits that processing organic waste would, in this way would entail, they can be divided into a couple different categories. So there's local economic growth. So there's a significant opportunity here for DSNY and the city and its agencies to essentially stimulate local economic growth rather than sending our waste management money to waste management or other large corporations that are not even based in New York City. So currently we pay through our refuse stream close to $200 million a year to export the organics that are not source separated. And then we also have a budget of around 30 million, I believe, to process the organics that are being picked up separated. So as we continue to see separation and capture rates increase for organic pickups, the city has an opportunity to renegotiate their contracts for refuse streams and divert more of that money to organics processing. And in doing so, we have a choice to either send that money to individual locally based composters or to large multi-billion-dollar companies like Waste Management. And so we hope that Intro 696 would sort of stimulate this local economic growth through either tipping fees at these facilities or after the product of compost is produced, it can be sold to the city or to other people. And so we've heard DSNY say that they can't do anything with their compost, but in talking to people who do actually operate compost sites around the city, they say that they have no trouble often donating it, but we would see a model and suggest a model in which they could either sell it at a market rate, which would generate around $15 million to $20 million of revenue in itself each year, or give it for free to city agencies that currently use a lot of soil. And we see currently large amounts of soil being shipped in from outside of the city. So this network would also hopefully reduce the emissions and burden that creates by supplying that demand locally. Another prong here is the environmental justice benefits. So as I talked about, the alternative structure would reintroduce significant burden on already overburdened communities, whereas Intro 696 would distribute what environmental burden would be introduced by these organic pickups more evenly, and help ensure that no one neighborhood is overburdened. And then another category here is jobs. So compost facilities create around twice the amount of jobs as landfills, and more jobs than aerobic digestion facilities. And also these jobs are often not necessarily higher quality, but more enjoyable for the workers. So we see that it offers some opportunity for engagement with natural material, and as I said, it might be a little bit smelly, but all things considered, it's probably the least harmful waste job that exists, in the sense that it allows people to secondarily engage in things like community gardens and other co-setting benefits like that. And we've even seen, which I'll get into, in this next category here, benefits, psychological and health benefits in engaging with organic material in this way. And so these compost facilities could be co-sited with other infrastructure, such as community gardens, as I said, which could give back food to the community. But it could also be in support of other goals that the city has, such as placemaking initiatives, so increasing opportunities for engagement with nature and social opportunities within a city, which we've seen dwindle as urban environments are built out, and also flooding infrastructure. And this is a very important point that's tied in with the compost sales, because the city is going to have increasing demand for soil and compost as we continue to build things like bioswales and rain gardens and coastal resiliency projects to protect from flooding. And another point here is that higher quality soil, which is produced compost, is often a higher quality soil than other sources. It's more efficient at absorbing water. So not only is it going to be a local supply to this demand, but it will also be a more efficient one. And then just the intangible benefits, such as the health benefits, the community building benefits, and things like that. That being said, there are also some challenges with the implementation of 696. So the first one that I wanted to touch on is trucking. So while the trucking burden will be more distributed than in the co-digestion model, it still is something to keep in mind. and we in our siting work, which is in the second part of this presentation, we really tried to ensure that the sites could be close to DOT truck routes so that we wouldn't have a lot of trucks driving through neighborhoods. But also the intro allows these these sites to be spread out so that trucking is also spread out and less concentrated and less burdensome. Odor is probably the most commonly cited concern with compost, because we know waste can be smelly, and specifically organic waste contains putrescibles, which when they decompose, they smell especially bad. And this is certainly a concern. There are a couple things though that can be done to mitigate it. So when compost is properly managed, it often doesn't create such a strong odor. Perhaps when it's being turned, if that is, turned windrows or the type of compost that's being employed, then specifically during that turning process, it can volatilize some of those odors. But we've seen in very close quarters with an organization like Compost Power, which operates 11 sites around the city in densely populated NYCHA campuses. Over the last couple of years, since beginning their operations, they've received zero odor complaints. So it is possible to compost in a dense urban environment with no odor complaints. And we also can introduce certain things like wind roses, which predict the direction and strength of wind when doing siting to ensure that the wind is not carrying what odor does exist into problematic areas. Another thing here is rats. There's been a lot of attention in New York City politics on this issue. And we think that generally compost will actually allow for an improvement in the rat problem, and this is because from the pickups, the putrescibles will be in hard case containers rather than in the past they've been in black plastic bags, which are much easier for rats to get into. And when done properly, compost can actually make rats have less food source or fewer food sources. And again, an example of Compost Power is that in their sites, they've seen that the rat holes have become increasingly further away from their sites as they protect their facilities through things like gravel beds and mesh netting. And then I guess a sort of secondary concern here is community support. So we want to be careful and sure that communities are in support of these facilities being sited in their neighborhoods, at least to what extent they can be. And this is both because we recognize that historically waste facilities have not necessarily been sited in the most conscientious way, but also doing so, we believe, would help bring down contamination levels and increase capture rates. And lastly, costs. So there certainly are costs associated with building these facilities and operating them. That being said, it is likely that this network would, all things considered, be less costly for the city than the digestion model once we are capturing as many organics as we eventually plan to or hope to. But also, even if we weren't to break even on it, there's this opportunity here for the city in spending what money they need to on waste management to stimulate local economic growth, which also benefits the communities that we exist in. So we also, as a part of our research and work this summer, did a siting and mapping analysis of New York City, which I believe some of you were engaged in as well. And in the past, DSNY and NYCDC have stated that they didn't find any sites that were suitable for composting in New York City. We wanted to re-examine that premise. We recognize there have been different zoning changes since then, but we also think that this is a quite important issue and wanted to re-examine whether or not that was really true. And so the workflow of this project was a research inquiry into certain necessary as well as favorable characteristics for composting sites. And then that was synthesized into criteria for these composting sites. That criteria was sent out to the SWABs as well as some other parties for feedback. That was then incorporated and we turned the criteria into a ranked methodology. And this essentially sort of stratified the criteria into an order of importance and necessity for these potential sites. And so that narrowed down we started with the entire city except for parks and narrowed it down based on this methodology. And that produced this map, which you see here on the slide, with a ranking of high, medium, and low suitability for sites that were identified in the city. And after we received these results, we then went into a site-by-site analysis of certain possible lots in each borough. And so the criteria, just to explain a little bit more, and I think you all had access to this in a previous email, but I can send it out again after the presentation, were based on the necessary characteristics of DEC permitting, as well as city zoning laws, and then further criteria were applied that were trying to capture things like site economics, the ease of complying with less stringent DEC permitting suggestions, and things like trucking and environmental justice. And so this brings us to some sample Brooklyn sites. So we have Bush Terminal Park and Red Hook lots. And so, by the way, sorry, just this map, the previous map may look discouraging, and it certainly does look discouraging. That being said, we did find plenty of space to reach this 180,000 ton capacity number in every borough except for Manhattan. And so just to go further into some of these example sites and what our further analysis looked like, here in the Bush Terminal image, you can see that there's an abandoned rail yard, and this is currently owned by the New York City Department of Small Business Services, and we estimate that there's around 60,000 tons of capacity here. Again, this will vary depending on the method of composting that's employed. That is a number that would be more likely achieved with in-vessel, but that that is up to site operators to determine. And also, you'll notice that in all these images, they're on the water, so that offers the possibility of marine transfer in addition to trucking. Could reduce some of the trucking burden. And then these Red Hook lots, which are privately owned, are also quite large, have high capacity opportunity, and specifically this one on the right here is a brownfield, and so there are certain federal and state grants that could be associated with eventually building that out into a composting facility. Just a couple other considerations, as I just touched on in those example analyses. There's a lot of environmental justice concerns. As you can see, this image on the right is from the New York City Environmental Justice Mapping Tool, which identifies all the environmental justice areas in the city, and they're almost half the city. And so we didn't necessarily want to rule out all of them in our mapping project, but we do want to be mindful of of places that currently are experiencing higher levels of burden, and we did incorporate a criteria that was worth 15% of our mapping analysis that tried to capture already existing neighborhoods with high concentrations of waste management or waste processing facilities. Another thing here is site economics and composting mechanics, and those two sort of go hand in hand in terms of site operators will ultimately have to decide how they want to operate their sites, and tied in with that the economics of the energy costs, the labor costs, things like that. And just also wanted to highlight that these facilities generally we focused on either permittable or registerable sites, and they would be subject to environmental impact review both at state and city level. So just trying to be mindful of the impacts of that down the road. That's difficult to do because they all include high levels of community engagement and community process, and that's hard to predict. But that is something to keep in mind as these facilities were to be cited. And so, yeah, that I guess is the overview of the work that that I conducted, in conjunction with the SWABs and the Office of the Brooklyn Borough President this summer. And I'm happy to, open it up for questions or discussion. I saw that there were a couple of notifications in the chat that I can address.
Okay, great. Thank you. So much. That was really great. I'm really impressive. Ezra, you make it look easy, but you've done a lot of diligent, thoughtful work, and we really, really appreciate this. You've moved us forward. You've moved the ball forward considerably down the field, I have to say. So how should we do this? You want to ask? Afia notes that mesh netting is more plastic. Yes.
It actually oftentimes, metal mesh. So it's actually better for the netting to be, or the mesh to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah, so that is a possibility, which I've seen too. Uli says she heard a great stat recently: 68 cents of every dollar spent at a local business stays in the local community. So thank you for that, Uli. That's a good point.
Yeah, and also just a follow-up about that. So we're seeing in other cities in North America, even rebates and other incentives for local compost facilities to be established. Specifically, an example is Scottsdale.
And okay, so Sharon asked a question: in the mapping piece, were flood zones considered?
Yeah, they were. We've heard from site operators that that DC has been very concerned about flooding for permitting for permitting applications. So we wanted to make sure that we were considering that, and we had criteria for both flood zones from heavy rain events as well as eventual floodplain sea level rise. Another thing to note, though, on that topic is that there's a possibility, depending on how the compost site is organized, that it can actually help reduce runoff and stormwater in absorbing. So just wanted to highlight that as well.
Good point. Thank you. And Uli asks, or urban heat islands, were they considered?
No, I'm not familiar with those, actually.
Uli, do you want to say what that is?
Yeah, just when I saw your map, I often look at this New York City temperature deviation map. It's just like really interesting to me to see the variation in temperature across the city. But when I saw your map, it seems like a lot of the areas where you identified as possible locations would drive truck traffic to areas that already have like increased temperatures. So I was wondering if that was the consideration.
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely were concerned about truck traffic and the concentration of it, and also just like it is true that a lot of these highlighted sites exist in neighborhoods that are already recognized as EJ communities, and a large function of that is just zoning restrictions, and even with the City of Yes amendments, it's not really going to be possible to cite large scale facilities in newer areas that previously were not zoned for them. So that is a concern. But that being said, the alternative that DSNY is planning on is sending it to North Brooklyn, which is even worse. So yeah.
Okay. I want to take a couple more questions from the chat. I see Greg has his hand up. Are size criteria for compost sites up for discussion? Are they all huge? Mark Hellerman asks.
So we were trying to focus on permitted sites specifically in this mapping work, because those are going to be the brunt of what brings us to that 180,000 ton capacity number. They're certainly up for discussion in the intro, and I know in the writing of it, there was an attempt to include a variety of sizes of sites.
Okay. Kendall asks, were any of the sites considered closed landfills, like Jamaica Bay? Is that on the e.g. on the Jamaica Bay?
I'm not sure if it is a closed landfill, but I know currently where Call-Ahead operates is the Jamaica Bay, and that was one site that we did identify. We didn't specifically look into any one type of lot in the survey. We sort of just applied the criteria and then did further analysis after. But I can look into
Okay. And Uli just put a link about heat islands in there. And then Sharon Sharon asks, was Rikers considered?
Yeah, so Rikers was considered, and it would be very helpful in reaching the desired capacity. We've seen that the passing of Rikers to other city agencies from the Department of Corrections has been quite delayed, and so we didn't want to rely on that in the mapping survey, and we didn't do further analysis. But there are certain organizations in their planning for renewable Rikers, such as RPA, Regional Plan Association, that has, I think their goal is to establish around 360 tons, 360,000 tons of capacity there. And actually a neat, I guess, kink in New York City zoning is that that number could theoretically count towards both the Brooklyn and Queens quota. I mean, sorry, Brooklyn and I mean, sorry, Queens and Bronx quotas. So there's a weird jurisdiction debate, but Rikers would certainly be helpful. Yeah.
Did you hear that?
What?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, we never were 100% sure which one it would count for.
Oh.
Would it be Queens or the Bronx?
Yeah. Okay.
Unclear.
Yeah. They'll be fighting over it.
Yeah.
Okay. I accidentally skipped another question from Doug Sims that says, great job. What does the market look like for New York City sourced compost products, noting higher land costs versus competitors?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Did you mean in that question, do you mean like the costs for site operators, or do you mean the market for the product of finished compost?
Yeah, Ezra, just my thought about it, in terms of how operators will work, and do so in a durable way. These work with these sites is going to be that they're going to have a revenue source, and that revenue source is going to be able to encompass their costs and a plus. So if their land costs are higher, and that's an assumption I'm making, than somebody who's operating in more rural areas, what does that market look like? How does their revenue source, how does that look? Who are they selling to, and how do those revenues look?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors there. Thanks for clarifying. So the first is that the revenue from compost sales is probably only a part of the money that these site operators would be receiving. The hope here is that the city would be able to divert the tipping fees that they currently pay to management to local site operators, and that would be the majority of the covering of their operation costs. And then just in terms of the revenue for the finished compost, it is true that their land costs would be higher, and likely their labor costs and all other things. There is a slight advantage in being local that they wouldn't have to ship the material in from further away, so people who are buying it wouldn't necessarily have to pay that aspect. But again, the compost sales are a small portion of what site operators would be receiving.
Okay. Doug, do you want to ask your next question about in-vessel system? And you might need to explain in-vessel system for some of our members.
Sure. And Kendall looks like he's providing an answer as well. This means that you have, instead of an open static pile, you have some circumstance where you might have a long tube. These can be 20 feet long, 4 feet or 5 feet in diameter. That's one example of an in-vessel composting system, and that is used to rotate and aerate the compost material that way. And it's basically a mechanized system. And the advantages of an in-vessel system are that they tend to be less inviting to pests and tend to accelerate the stage where the compostables become, tend to produce less odor. And the disadvantages being that there's obviously the cost of the product, of the machine. There's maintenance to be done on the machine. There can be, parts, that fail, and there's energy typically needed to operate the machines. So those are the kind of the downsides versus, human powered or, running a bobcat and just turning over a pile. So this is something where it's contained in some kind of a, like it says, vessel.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sharon.
The vessel, it's completely contained as a tube, or does part of it open up so it gets wind and aeration?
You can look it up.
Yeah, Sharon, can you look it up so that we can move
Okay.
on? Sorry,
Go ahead.
we've got the
Sorry.
Google machine.
I'll see if I can share something in the chat.
Thanks.
Yeah, but just to quickly answer, we were looking at a couple of the different earth flow machines. One advantage of those is that they're so standardized to like shipping container size, and so that would be helpful in looking at. There's a couple other sites in addition to the Bush terminal one that are old or out of service train tracks, and so that would be helpful for those.
Okay. Then, okay, so now Greg and then Audrey.
Yeah, Ezra, great job, by the way. It's very important to have some data here to look at, because I think a lot of this is so hypothetical that, But anyways, as a former member of Community Board 8 in Brooklyn, which is North Crown Heights, I know there's about a 6-block M zone there that I didn't notice on your chart. And I think with a zoning amendment, you probably could process food scraps in either an in-vessel or in a anaerobic digester in those areas. I mean, the great thing about them is that most of these areas you looked at are on the periphery, on the edges of the borough, the center of the boroughs. So you're going to basically be trucking stuff a long distance versus if you could process it in an M zone that was in the center of the borough, you would save a lot of money because basically food scraps are heavy. So trucking is really critical. If you could save trucking, also keeping it local creates more jobs in the community. So I just wondered, did you look at any of these smaller M zone sites?
Yeah, we did. The biggest issue with a lot of those and the ones that are closer to the center of boroughs is that the state has in their permitting requirements a distance that must be met from all residences and businesses, and so those M zones are pretty densely populated with residences and businesses, and so it's possible to have a smaller site there, but not a larger one.
Just thinking about using like in vessels and biodigesters, you get greater throughput for a smaller space, and the smell and noise factors can be inside a building actually. So you might be able to get a variance from the state just because of New York City being New York City. Yeah. Anyways, with that, I'll move on, but just thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, we didn't think about like whether or not permitting would be changed, but the in-vessel, unfortunately, the permitting stratifications are based on tonnage accepted by the facility, not necessarily like the the throughput or operating time or things like that. But yeah, thank you.
So Audrey, do you want to ask your question? Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Ezra.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, thanks, Ezra. Your presentation was really great. I was curious, and you mentioned this a little bit, and I feel like people on this call may already have this context, but can you talk about the different partners on the analysis? Like you said that you worked with the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, and then you'd sent like the criterias around a swabs and other folks. I'm kind of curious about who's going to see the results and how it's going to be used and how much buy-in already exists around this analysis. Thanks.
Yeah, so so as I mentioned earlier, there's already 20 sponsors on the co-sponsors on the bill in City Council. Some other organizations that have expressed support for it are New York Lawyers for Public Interest, National Resource Defense Council, and I believe a couple of 350.org testified for it. So that there's certainly also interest, in the private and nonprofit sector around the city, and we talked with some of those folks in the process. And then in terms of next steps with this work, the goal is ultimately to have the legislation in some form passed, and so hopefully this research will be used to help inform the people that are needed to support it to eventually get it there.
Okay. Are there any other questions, or Ezra? Oh yeah. Does anybody here have any questions? Beth, do you have one? Oh,
Yeah, I do. I was curious, actually, looking at the map, seeing, how many sites were along the waterfront, if that was also an intentional consideration about thinking about transport by barge, or if that just was merely coincidental.
That was merely coincidental. I think there's some overlap there with the M zones, but it is certainly something that we looked at and thought about in the analysis on a site-by-site basis. That would be a possibility. That'd be great if the city really looked into that.
Excellent. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. I just had a question too, which is just how much. So Vondra's not here tonight, but as an example of somebody who's participated in this before, but I also didn't see on the map places like Compost Matter on Governor's Island, or just a lot of the nonprofits that have participated before and presumably will be participating again now that City Council funding has been restored. So just building on their work already. Big reuse, all of those places.
Yeah, so we some notable things about Big Reuse and Vondra's operation is that they're on city park land, and we did not include city park land because historically they've not been very amenable to composting. And we've talked with, actually, part of our discussion with New York Lawyers for Public Interest was a possibility of getting them reopened to that. And we saw the New York Bar Association wrote a co-letter with or a letter co-authored with the New York Lawyers for Public Interest about this topic. Hoping to compel parks to reestablish compost, but we didn't want to assume that was a possibility. And then in terms of the already existing other facilities, that those numbers and their capacity will count towards the intros number. And we didn't necessarily see any of their sites come up in our composting analysis, but we would certainly hope to that the city would engage them as they look to site new facilities, given that they have experience with operation.
Michael asks, what did you find out about the content of PFAS in food scrap waste? Food scraps.
So we didn't do specific research into that. Samantha McBride has done a little bit of work looking into that, but it is it's certainly a concern just generally, the contamination levels in organic pickups and multi-unit pickups specifically. The hope is that contamination levels can go down with education and outreach. That the PFAS in food scrap waste is going to be a problem, and there are requirements in the state laws to screen compost before it gets introduced into the aerobic digestion system, to try to make sure that there isn't any contamination in it. So hopefully that would reduce any PFAS in the resulting product. But we didn't do any research into that.
And then Kendall has a question. Are you only concerned with DSNY collected organics or also commercial? I'm not sure. I think intro 696 maybe is what we're talking about, what we're concerned with.
Sure.
But go ahead.
Yeah, so intro 696 is only DSNY. It only relates to DSNY, but there is certainly a possibility and likely possibility that the facilities that would be cited as a result of it could also accept commercial organics, and we've seen that DSNY is in support of mandating all commercial businesses to separate their organics. So it's also likely that there'll be a significant increase in that material soon.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Anybody here? Matt? Sherry? Frederick? Pablo?
The Cross Brooklyn train, are there any sites available there?
Sorry, so what do you mean by
The one that goes all the way from Bush Army Terminal, goes all the way into Jamaica.
You mean
There's-
the new thing that they're trying?
No.
Thinking about the Interborough
No, it's been there since
This is
World
very-
War
Very
II.
old,
Oh, the old
unused.
But they
track.
did
Oh.
renovate one track. I don't know what for, but
It's very cool.
Mm.
It goes right
Yeah.
under the bridge.
yeah.
Yeah. So the governor has a plan to restore rail traffic through the Interborough Express.
Wow.
That's a plan that our office is very supportive of, so we're not looking at other uses for
Okay.
that rail
Good,
line at
good.
this time.
Wow. Wow.
That's
So it
not
might
the one
help
that goes around the
congestion
edge.
pricing.
That's a different one.
Well, yeah, actually, because there's no congestion pricing, we don't know anymore if there's gonna be money for that, but
Yeah.
that's a whole separate
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes,
That's
exactly,
cool.
the
Thank
IBX.
you. Yeah. Oh, nice, Sophia. Thanks. Anything else?
I have another question. Actually, I might have missed this, but how much space total did you find in terms of like capacity? Because you said that it reached the required capacity in all boroughs except for Manhattan. But what was the total amount overall?
In terms of square footage, I don't know that off the top of my head. That we didn't do a further analysis on all the sites that were highlighted. Partially because once we sort of realized that we could hit that number, we didn't necessarily want to highlight more than we're necessarily considering that there were a lot of further considerations for site operators. But there are a lot of numbers on individual lot sizes in the report that we produced, which will be public soon, hopefully. And I could look into summing those and sending that to you if you're interested.
Just tagging onto that, do you think it was about the square footage of 2 Yankee stadiums, which 14 Yankee stadiums, which
that we're using at the EPA too.
is it?
Yeah, Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
That's the unit?
That's the
It's YS's?
Yeah. The commissioner cited that that's how much we would need to process that amount of compost. So this
That's
Standardized
standard windrows that are exposed.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we replaced 2 or 3 of those windrows on Staten Island, we, according to the mayor of New York City, increased capacity there 2,000%.
Can y'all hear Matt?
Did you guys hear him?
Yeah.
I think so. Nobody's saying no.
I could barely hear, so I'm not sure if I heard everything.
You can say it
Windrow
again.
capacity.
Yeah.
So when the Staten Island facility, the Staten Island facility was expanded, it really wasn't expanded. They eliminated standard windrows and replaced them with covered, what are called gore bays, which are cement bays. You put the food scraps in the bay, you cover it with a Gore-Tex cover, and you blow air through it, and it has a much higher throughput, and increase the capacity of Staten Island 2,000%. So there's a lot of these sites where if we use that kind of technology, we certainly would have a higher throughput than if we had just standard static piles.
I just want to put a caveat on it, which is, and I think something that we're going to have to be really clear about when the report comes out, is that the sites that we identified, a lot of them are examples. Some of them are privately owned, so that's a big hurdle, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
The public sites are probably the more low-hanging fruit, although some of them have current uses like parking lots. You know, and so that's a value judgment, I think, and a conversation and an advocacy point to take up with the city about, you know, what is the best use of a site.
Anything else?
A tangent.
I know. Have you, I don't know, talked with your professors about this? Are they excited about or anybody?
I mean, a couple. I just enrolled in a class about sustainable and resilient cities, so that'll be interesting. And there's some conversations about like traffic and things like that. So, yeah, hopefully. And actually, funny enough, my school did host a compost researcher based in New York last spring, which is a funny coincidence. I haven't talked to, but I've working with the professor that hosted him. And just to quickly answer Lucille's question, some examples are Austin, Calgary, and San Francisco, other cities. In North America, and Vienna also has a pretty robust program.
Okay. San Francisco and what?
I said San Francisco, Calgary, and Austin.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Well, we could thank you, Ezra, so much for joining us and for talking. That we have a few community notes that Betty mentioned about something on the ballot initiative, but I feel like I just want to say thank you so much for coming, and it's really great. I thought it was fantastic presentation, so locally applicable.
Hey, Greg has another question.
Who does?
No,
he's just clapping.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you so much. So Ezra, you're welcome to stay and participate in. We're going to talk about a ballot initiative, which Betty mentioned, and you're also welcome to go, and we're not offended.
Have you had any job offers?
Oh yeah, Frederick says, "Did you have any job offers? Have you had any job offers?"
Not yet. I'm beginning the arduous process.
Yeah, wait till you present this at a conference, and then you'll get the job offer.
Pouring in, just
Yeah.
pouring in.
Yeah, they're going to beat down your door. Very, very great.
Well, thank you all for hosting me. And yeah, I guess I can just put my email in the chat if anyone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my Broken Bear president address has been deactivated, but here's if anyone needs to reach out. Yeah, thank you all again.
Thanks so much for all of your work this summer and for this great presentation. Thank you, thank you. Okay. I don't know if Betty is still here, but she suggested putting on the announcements. Oh, good, she is here. Do you want to mention the proposal on the November ballot? The city proposal?
I don't have it in front of me. If you can just raise it, I don't know anything really about it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to talk about it and ask if anybody knows. About City Proposal 2, cleaning public property. This proposal would amend the city charter to expand and clarify the Department of Sanitation's power to clean streets and other city properly and require disposal of waste in containers. Voting yes will expand and clarify the Department of Sanitation's power to clean streets and other city property and require disposal of waste in containers. Voting no leaves laws unchanged. Interesting. Do you know anything about this, Lacey?
I wish that you had given me a heads up.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I would have done a little more research
We
because
can know by
I will tell you honestly that I don't fully understand why they feel they need this because they are already legislating
They're sort of putting it in the
containerization
process.
So if
through
they vote-
rulemaking.
yeah. So if we vote no, does
I-
containerization not go forward?
That I don't understand
That
it.
seems
I'm
crazy.
sorry. If you give me some time,
All
I
right,
will
I know,
try
sorry
to.
about that.
It might be the POP, the publicly owned places that are owned, the buildings owned by the, but they have to open it to the public.
I don't think that's what this is about, but
Well, we have another month before the ballot initiative.
Let me try to do
Dig
some
it.
digging here.
Okay.
Because I find it confusing as well.
Well, thank you, Betty, for unearthing that.
Yeah, we just all need more information on that because that could be important.
Yeah.
You know,
And
slipping it in like that and we don't know what it's about.
par for the
Thank
course.
you for looking into it, Lacey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's pretty cryptic, but it's obviously related to the plethora of containerization initiatives that the department has done. And it must be that the department of attorneys or city attorneys have said, we need something in the law to be clear about that rather than just doing this through regulation. So
Well, maybe they want to wiggle away from it and say, well, the people don't want it. So, you know, the people have spoken, so we don't have to do this.
Yeah, I'm not aware there's been any legal challenge to the regulations that they've proposed. That hasn't.
Oh.
I don't think that's happened.
I think that must be what it is. That they must see a loophole. That there is a possibility that they could get sued to say you don't actually have this isn't within your department's jurisdiction. I guess.
Well, I mean, as we talked earlier, for the 1 to 9s, you know, they're telling everyone they've got to spend $50 or $60 to buy a DSNY certified container, right? So what's their authority to do that?
Right. If the purpose is to have something that's really heavy plastic and has the top and wheels and, you know, all of that stuff. And, you know, myself and my neighbors, we bought that in Home Depot. Why do we have to buy another one, you know? And then I was told it's because they have to wheel it to a curb cut down the block somewhere. And people don't know about this. And then they're going to be more crazy because then sanitation isn't going to wheel this thing that you've spent $50 on back to your house. They're just going to leave it at the end of the block or in the street, which they often do, and it gets run over. Ours get run over more than they get stolen, actually. Just saying.
All right.
There is a report that they put out on all of the ballot proposals that may shine some light on this.
Who put it out? Like some watchdog?
The commission, the Charter Revision Commission.
Oh, okay.
Just need to review that. This was something that wasn't in their original draft and then made its way to the final. So, yeah.
Okay.
Plot thickens.
Yeah. Interesting. I have my people I look up on social media where I'm like, oh, what are you doing about this ballot
So,
initiative?
Rhonda, could you get the commissioner of Department of Sanitation to address this body?
Yeah, that would be funny if she came to this meeting.
Yeah, but she lives in a doorman building with service. She doesn't live in a little row house out in the borough, you know. She's not going to know what we're talking about.
She might. Yeah. I mean, we can dig around. We can certainly dig around, and maybe that's our October speaker.
We could ask.
Yeah.
I mean, if this is something that they want, they should be able to explain why.
Yeah.
We just have to.
Yeah. Yeah. We could. All right.
Solve that problem.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing it up, Betty.
Thank
okay.
you.
Anybody have anything else in the last few moments? This was a great meeting. I think we had a lot of discussion tonight. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming.
Matt, did you want to say something about our Wednesday meeting?
Oh, The Wednesday SWAB meeting?
Oh, yeah, we have a Wednesday SWAB meeting this Wednesday.
Manhattan. Manhattan SWAB.
Is the Wednesday meeting on
Sure.
We have Crystal Hudson, from the City Council, who will speak to us about her EPR, not EPR, but recycling study bill for textiles, which is, by the way, 6% of our waste.
Yep.
We can have Brooklyn people.
Yeah, I know. She's a Brooklyn person.
Is it a hybrid meeting or is it just
It's
Zoom?
hybrid, but you can come in person too. So,
1370, I think, Broadway, 5th floor. Is that,
we
is
won't
it?
be in person, Petty Ken.
But you, if you want to come in person, you need to give Allison your name so she can put you on the security people's pass.
Well, yeah, the guard downstairs was just giving up. She doesn't care anymore. So you can
And
just don't worry about it.
And Crystal Hudson may not be there in person. She may have to do Zoom as well.
It's hard to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
It is. It
I
really
do it.
I think Crystal Hudson's going to be here with all of us.
Y'all want to ride.
Meeting room for Crystal.
Yeah.
Textiles is a big deal, folks. We got to stay on top of
Yeah.
everything. As someone said to me the other day, it's not just organics.
Yeah,
that's true.
Oh, who said that?
We have
I
NYCHA,
don't
we
know.
have textiles, we have residential recycling.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we also have
We have
plastic
trees, we have pumpkins,
reduction,
we have
packaging
all kinds of-
reduction,
that's still walkers.
recycling infrastructure and bottle bill. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great
Good night.
evening, and we'll see you next month. All right. Bye.
Bye. Oh, this is